Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I recently read a book that I had some surprisingly mixed thoughts about, and I thought it was worth sharing them just because this book is, on balance, I think great because of the things it does for representation and inclusion and discussion of marginalised identities, but it also does so in a really bizarre way, and I felt like I needed to just share how strangely written this book is because I couldn't not acknowledge it. As much as I loved this book for what it was able to do for asexual representation, black representation, biromantic representation, and a whole other host of identities, it still was, I don't want to say bad, but just not very well written. I am talking about Let's Talk About Love by Claire Can, which came out in 2018, so it's been around for a little while, and I just want to share my thoughts because it was a really strange experience reading it, and I've made notes for a change on what I'm going to talk about just because I feel like there is so much to be said about how this book works, and so I'm just going to go through my list of things. So, to begin with, Let's Talk About Love is about a black, asexual, biromantic girl named Alice who has just been broken up with by her girlfriend for being asexual. Her girlfriend Margot didn't like that Alice didn't want to have sex with her, but that she was just to make Margot happy, and so she broke up with her, and Alice is devastated for a little bit, but then she meets a cute new guy named Takumi at her job in the local library, and a romance ensues. I'm describing this plot in very basic terms because, if I'm honest, there isn't a huge amount there. That's basically all I can say about it that isn't overly emphasising the things that it's put on the blurb, which I feel aren't an accurate representation of what this book is or does. It is primarily focused just on her falling in love with Takumi, and that's it. I will say off the bat that this is very much a love story from an asexual perspective, not a story about being asexual. I was under the impression, or maybe had just presumed, that this was a story about someone exploring their ace identity and it being very centred around their asexuality, but in fact it is much more about exploring what it means to be in romantic relationships and to pursue romantic relationships when you are asexual. So as much as it is much more about the love story, I've also seen this advertised as a library love story because Alice and Takumi meet at the library they're both working at. Again, I don't think this is an accurate representation of the book. Alice is in the library maybe 4 times. It really isn't about them falling in love in a library. It is much more about, oh, 2 people who happen to meet in a library falling in love. It's not very focused on that aspect of their relationship. So I'm going to do my unfortunately long list of grievances first, just because I feel like everything good this book does comes with the caveat that it is not a very well-written story, and I hate to say it, not least because I feel like being overly critical of stories about marginalised identities, particularly ones where I don't share a lot of the identities as the characters, is often misplaced. I shouldn't be focusing on all the things that I thought went wrong with this story because it's not really a story for me in many aspects. This is a story about a black girl with a Japanese love interest, with a white best friend who has a Filipino boyfriend, about all the myriad of people and experiences that she has across the story, and I shouldn't overly criticise them just because I'm white. I don't get all of this stuff, and it's not my place to talk about these stories in the same way. So I was really hesitant to make this video just because I didn't want to dissuade people from reading it a huge amount, because it's a great thing to be written about. It's a great thing to have more stories about, which is why it also really sucks that it's not done very well. And so I thought I would just talk about the things it doesn't do very well, because I think it bears noting that this could have been done so much better. My main complaint with this story is it is just written in a really weird way. I was reading the story and feeling like I was missing maybe half of what was going on, just because it was written in such an unfathomably confusing way. It wasn't like it was written badly necessarily, it just felt like parts of it were missing. Like, it felt like if you put the book through a sieve and caught the little bits that came out at the bottom, that was what the book was, and there was all this stuff that had just been collected in the top that hadn't been included. And so it was really, really weird to read, just because it felt like alternate sentences had been ripped out or something, because there just wasn't enough there to constitute enough character, enough plot, enough dialogue, enough understanding just of what was going on. It was really bizarre, because I was reading this book really slowly to make sure that I wasn't, like, skipping over parts of it. But it wasn't that, it just wasn't there. My only thought for why this could be is that it was really, really hastily edited by the author in order to get it to fit a word count. Because more than anything, I noticed this book was really quite short for YA fiction, 280 pages. Given it is on average 350 to 400 pages for a YA contemporary story, that's quite short. And part of me thinks that maybe if it had been just 50 pages longer, it could have been able to go into just enough more depth at different points to give it any kind of substance. But I did wonder if maybe the author had been given a word limit and told you can't go over this, take stuff out, and so she just picked out things at random that then led to it being really, really sparse and confusing. My only other thought for why it could be like this is that it could just be a case of the author knows the characters so well that they don't write everything about them on the assumption that the reader will be able to pick up enough from what is there to form this larger view of the characters that the author has. But unfortunately, I couldn't do that. I was reading it and going, I know barely anything about these people. I don't understand their motivations, their interests, their function in the story beyond their literal role of, like, love interest, best friend's boyfriend, all that kind of thing. It was just so strange. As well as that, it felt really badly plotted. It felt like so many elements of the story could have been taken away and it would have borne no detriment to the story. For example, the opening chapter is Alice being broken up with by her ex-girlfriend Margot for being asexual. However, that's not the catalyst of the story. Her breakup with Margot doesn't feature beyond chapter 5. It bears no relation to the rest of the story, and really all it does is serve as backstory for why she's uncomfortable discussing her asexuality and potentially coming out to Takumi as their relationship gets a bit more intimate. It was really, really strange because the blurb says it starts with Alice being broken up with by Margot, and yet it bears no impact on the story. It was so strange, the things that were chosen to be part of the plot. I felt like it could have started with Alice meeting Takumi, and instead there could have been flashbacks to her breakup and her relationship with Margot, which would have done a much better job at showing that Alice is uncomfortable talking about her asexuality, without it just being a seemingly pointless section at the beginning of the book where Alice mopes and cries and laments her breakup for 5 chapters and then seemingly does not care. Margot is not mentioned beyond about chapter 5 of this book, and it's weird. Why would you start with such an instrumental thing to a character's development as a breakup and then not reference it past about the first 30-40 pages? It was bizarre, and I don't know why it was there. I guess because it makes for a good blurb, but you shouldn't be writing a book to fit the blurb. It really did just feel like plot points were picked up and dropped at random, seemingly. I'm probably going to end up going into spoilers territory now, just because it's very difficult to talk about this and give examples without inadvertently revealing elements of the plot. Alice starts seeing a therapist at some point in the book to talk about her feelings about Takumi and her battles with her acceptance of her asexuality and to just work stuff out. She has 2 therapy sessions in the book that you see on the page. It just felt so lumped in. It felt like those could have been taken out. Same with Margot. And then we get to the development of her relationship with Takumi, which starts out really bizarrely. They meet at the library, of course, because Alice works there and Takumi also gets a job there, and so they have a little bit of interaction, and during which time Alice realises that she is attracted to him. And she's not sure whether she is sexually attracted to him, and that's really confusing. And so she then inexplicably becomes really passive-aggressive and against him for a bunch of chapters, during which time he just inexplicably dotes on her. Like, he starts bringing her lunch and dinner to the library every single day, even though she's being a bit of a bitch, if I'm honest. And then suddenly there are random time skips where we're told that she has spent loads of time with Takumi and that they're really getting along really, really well. But we don't see any of this happen. We literally just go from they meet, Alice is horrible to him, oh, now they're best friends. Which made no sense in a story that seemingly focuses on the romance aspect. Why wouldn't you show more of the getting to know each other, more of the befriending each other? You get a few brief instances here and there, like where she randomly takes care of him while he's ill, and they ditch work to go stay in a log cabin somewhere, which, again, for a library love story, they spend a shocking amount of time not in the library. It was just so weird, because it meant that this whole relationship was built on the stuff that we don't actually see in the book. And I was just like, if this is meant to be a love story, show, don't tell us that they're getting along really well. We need to see that stuff. I wasn't rooting for them as a couple purely because I was there going, what reason do I have to support them being together? All I've seen them do so far is have a couple of shifts at the library, Alice being mean to him, and then being told that they've spent ages going to the cinema, and the beach, and the aquarium, and the zoo, and that she meets Takumi's nieces. It was weird. One of my biggest pet peeves with this story is the fight that happens between Alice and Feeney about the midpoint through the book, during which time Alice gets so upset with Feeney that she basically moves in with Takumi for an extended period of time, meaning that she is with him for ages. But I want to talk about it just because it annoyed me so much. Feeney is Alice's best friend, and she starts living with Feeney and Feeney's boyfriend Ryan at the beginning of the story. Alice, Feeney and Ryan all go to a Halloween party, and Alice at one point gets up to go get drinks for her, Feeney and Ryan, and comes back to find that Feeney and Ryan have disappeared. She goes to look for them, and another partygoer says, yeah, they're in a bedroom upstairs, best not to disturb them, and Alice is understandably upset because she's just been ditched by her two friends who are dating to go and have sex, which figures. However, there then starts this huge fight where Feeney goes on about how Alice has been continually abandoning them for Takumi, and, you know, Alice moves in with Takumi after this because she doesn't want to be around Feeney because she feels so rejected by her two friends. And Feeney is going on about how much Alice has abandoned them and that she's been replaced by Takumi as her best friend, and Alice is there saying, you abandoned me for your boyfriend, I'm being shoved to the side purely because you guys are dating and you want to get married, that's not fair. And then Feeney turns it around and is like, you make everything about you, you don't think anyone else matters other than you. And then Alice, in the middle of this, suddenly starts crying and apologises for victimising herself and making it all about her, and she's so sorry, and Feeney could never be replaced in her eyes. And Feeney barely accepts this apology, but agrees because she can't be bothered to keep fighting with Alice anymore, and this annoyed me so much. You can't expect us to root for Feeney and Alice's friendship if all Feeney does is have double standards and be barely forgiving of Alice, when Alice has, out of nowhere, accepted all blame for a situation that, in my opinion, was all on Feeney. So for all my issues with this book, which are mostly down to the way it was written, the way it was plotted, the balance of the plot points, and just the general execution of this story compared to, like, the blurb and the ways that people talk about this book, I do have to say that there are a lot of things I really appreciated about this book, and unfortunately this book was so confusingly written in my eyes, that these plot points didn't really get the opportunity to shine as much as they could have done had it been written better, but I do think they bear talking about just because they are such an important part of this story and why it is such an important story in the first place. Alice has a therapist that she likes, and that therapy is portrayed in a beneficial and positive way. So often in YA, therapy is demonised, but Alice realises that she's got problems that she can't work out on her own and she needs someone to talk to in order to sort out her own thoughts, so she goes and sees a therapist. And the therapist is helpful and kind and supportive, and he even gives her discounted appointments because he knows she can't really afford them, and they generally have a very healthy client-therapist relationship, which is so unusual, and even if it was so minor given its role within the plot, I thought it was really excellent to have that portrayal of therapy as something beneficial to everyone, regardless of if you're suffering from a mental illness or a trauma or something. Alice is just going to sort out her feelings about Takumi, really, and then also uses it to talk about her argument with Feeney, because those are things negatively impacting her life, and I thought it was excellent to show therapy as being just a place you go to sort things out. And of course, Alice is biromantic asexual. This is huge, to have a story about someone who is not only asexual but not also aromantic, because sometimes those two identities get conflated as, oh, people who don't want relationships also don't want sex, and vice versa. But with Alice's story, the distinction between romantic attraction and sexual attraction is so important, and I think it is really, really beneficial for people who don't identify as ace or arrow to be able to see that these two things are very, very distinct, and that it's important for a lot of people to use the split attraction model to be able to work out what it is they want from relationships and to convey that to their partners. Alice has a lot of struggles about what it means to be asexual, because at the beginning she realises she is attracted to Takumi, but she's not sure in what capacity. She has this thing called the cutie code that she and her friends use, which is basically a code from green to red of, like, for allosexual people, like, attractive to, oh my god, they're so hot I would want to have sex with them on the spot, but for her it's like, you know, a good cat video all the way up to a really aesthetically pleasing room, which I just thought, talking about aesthetic attraction as well, it's really ticking all the boxes for covering the different types of attraction and how they don't all mean the same thing. But she meets Takumi and he goes off the scale of the cutie code and she doesn't realise what that means. She's unsure what it means that she looks at him and realises that her body is having a physical reaction to seeing him. She gets aroused for the first time and she's confused by that. And so I thought it was really, really good to see that kind of confusion in a very literal way, and to have her exploring it with herself, with her friends, with her therapist. And I think it really does benefit the stories that we tell about asexual people so much to be able to include the confusion about whether or not something is romantic or sexual or aesthetic or sensual or platonic. There's so many different types of attraction. I'm not an LGBT channel, I won't go into them, but I thought it was so, so beneficial. Well, I was talking for so long about that my phone informed me it had hit maximum storage, so yes, I thought it was very, very good how it explored the differences between different types of attraction and how it is very important to the asexual experience and to other people's awareness of it. My final really, really good point is that Takumi's reaction to Alice's coming out is really, really good, and not just because he is positive. Alice's coming out to Takumi is in two parts. Initially, she just tells him as she is asking him if he wants to date her, and she just says, by the way, I'm asexual, I don't want to have sex with you no matter how much I like you, and he initially reacts not spectacularly well. He just kind of goes, oh, well, I like you enough to want to have sex with you, so that kind of makes me think we're not on the same level. I need to get back to you on this. And Alice immediately feels awful and goes, no, it's okay, I'll go away and I'll sort this out myself. But then he meets up with her in the library and says, look, I didn't react in the best way because I didn't know enough and I didn't realise enough about it, and then has a whole different conversation with her basically about how he didn't realise really that wanting to have sex with someone wasn't the biggest quantifier of how much you loved them, but that now that he has come to terms with this and understood, he doesn't mind the idea of being in a relationship with Alice that doesn't have sex involved, and that he definitely wants to be with her. And I thought this was so excellent. Coming out isn't always an easy process. Coming out, especially to someone that you are interested in or that you have a particularly strong connection to, is very, very difficult, and I thought it was fantastic to show, firstly, that it happens in stages, and secondly, that people aren't awful if they don't immediately accept or understand perfectly. Because Takumi doesn't, but he takes the time to think about his thoughts and feelings and work out exactly how he does feel. And it turns out that, yeah, he really likes Alice, and it doesn't matter to him if she does or doesn't want to have sex with him, because he just wants to be with her. And although I thought the epilogue, again with so many other parts of the book, was just kind of an added part that didn't really bear much impact on the story, I did think it really helped with solidifying that Takumi and Alice's relationship is really healthy and really happy, even though sex isn't a part of it, especially because sex isn't a part of it. And I thought it was exceptionally important to show to a younger audience that, you know, this isn't important just for asexual people, but for young people who have been groomed or who don't realise that sex isn't such an integral part of life as society and their peers may make them show. I think about how much sex was pushed on me when I was a young teenager and how much it was seen as just, this is how life is and you will have to get used to it. And I think about how useful it would have been to read a book, probably better written than Let's Talk About Love, but that talked about the fact that relationships can be happy and healthy and fulfilling without sex, and that in fact that is a much more important part of having a happy relationship. So I thought that was an excellent part of the story. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kann. I have so many thoughts and feelings about this, and on balance I think I would have to give it a rating of like 3 stars, just because the way it was written and structured and plotted was so bizarre and confusing and deeply unhelpful to the wider messages it tries to spread, that it does dampen down the effects that it has through its incredibly positive messages about sex and relationships and asexuality and accepting yourself and being accepted by others. However, the things that it does say are so valuable and so important, and the nuanced ways that it does explore them I thought were fantastic. Apologies for this being so long and rambly and ranty. Again, I don't like to criticise books that generally do so much good for marginalised identities because I don't think it is helpful in trying to spread these messages. But I was just so baffled by this book that I felt like I needed to talk about it just to exercise these thoughts from my mind, if nothing else. But there we go. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please like this video if you liked it. Comment down below if you've read this or if you've read other stories that explore ace identities, particularly within other marginalised identities. Let me know what you thought. If you have any better recommendations, I would love to hear them. But yeah, I would be really interested to know what other people thought of this book, just because I had a look through some reviews on Storygraph and people seem to generally be incredibly positive about it and thought it was an excellent story, and I'm there going, really? Really? Thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see me talk about more bookish content, and I will see you next time with hopefully a less ranty video. Okay, bye. What is this one bit of uncurled hair doing? It just wants to hang out. Sir, you are not part of the image.